Hello and welcome to the Startups of London podcast. I'm your host Ozan and the founder of Startups of London. Today, I'm joined by Kelly Klifa, co-founder of Ally Health. Welcome, Kelly, to our chat.
Hi, Ozan. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you today.
So let's jump straight in from the deep end, what it is like to work as a co-founder, as a startup founder in London. What is it that you had not expected before you started all of this?
That's a good question. I like it. So what I hadn't expected, I think, is the strength of the ecosystem that you have in London. I think it's just an amazing sort of community of founders that really are out there. You know, we're all trying to solve different problems. We're all working on different aspects, especially in health tech, as I am. But there is this sort of community feeling where you're really able to support each other. Sharing insights, and it just really helps you push ahead as a founder. And I think that's so valuable when you have, as you always do in this startup journey, when you have moments of doubts or moments where you're seeking additional support, that ecosystem is very strong. I think what I like about London as well is there is very many facets to that community. So in health tech, we can spend days talking to scientists and researchers who are working on sort of the most cutting edge technology and research. And then you can also, the next day be really getting to know investors, getting to know what excites them. And I think it's just the intersection of all these conversations that keeps it so dynamic and such a great place to start a business.
How long has it been since you started Ally Health? And was this your first startup?
Yeah, so we started Ally in May of this year, and we've been on quite the journey since then. But before Ally, I had co-founded another startup called Testing for All. And Testing for All, I co-founded with James Monaco back in April 2020. It's not-for-profit COVID testing business. And so that was my first taste of entrepreneurship, really. And I loved it. We had a roller coaster 2 years. We did large-scale COVID testing, over 1 million tests in 2021. So it prepared me, in a way, over the course of 2 years. I probably experienced, I think, what most entrepreneurs would experience over maybe 5 or 10 years of crazy scale up, and then all the ups and downs that come with it. So Ally is now back to kind of the drawing board in a way, with the challenges and the excitement of a pre-revenue startup. So it's been really fascinating to go through that transition.
A few founders I had a chat in the couple last years. It really shows if they have built a startup and then they're starting their second project, or if it's their first time around. There's, I think, a real sense of appreciation about how difficult it can be. At the same time, there's more experience. So how do you think you're different starting your new business compared to the first time you started a startup?
That's a good question. I think I am really acutely aware of the need for focus. I think that's really where I've learned and grown so much. And it's when you start off, it's very tempting to try and be everything to everyone, because, you're out there trying to kind of narrow down on your hypothesis, you're testing out your idea. And naturally, you will come across very many different opinions and many different opportunities. And there is almost, I guess, for me, what I experienced initially was this sort of like FOMO, I guess, of, okay, gosh, if I can't address this problem, then, I may be missing out on this amazing opportunity to scale further. But I think it's holding really strong convictions and picking a focus as early as possible. We had almost, with Testing for All, the luxury of being given a focus, if you want, because COVID testing was such a a pressing need at the start of the pandemic, and it was so well defined in the UK with very much a sort of marketplace system, if you recall, of like travel testing and these things.
Yeah.
So in a way, I often say that I didn't really have to look for a product market fit. I could focus, and James and I could focus on really being great at executing and really being amazing on the tech side and the operations side. And I didn't have all the uncertainty of finding a product market fit in a way. And now going into Ally, I'm actually really encountering that challenge in a completely different light, which I love, because I think it's adding to my kind of panel of experiences, and it's adding value as well for us as a team to go through that process. But yeah, it's definitely needs focus.
One of the most difficult things is to fix a demand problem. Next to impossible, unless you're creating a market. I remember, I don't know if you've encountered this. There was something called Airbnb experience. Perhaps there still is.
Yes. Yeah.
This was before COVID, and I was trying to explore the landscape for startups and entrepreneurs. And I went to one of these Airbnb experience events for startups. And there I met a guy called Anthony, and he was kind of a mentor. He was showing us a tour of the different places and so on. And we had this conversation about what a market is. And I remember having a really interesting perspective from him, where he said, basically in 99% of the startups, you do not create a market. Because I think there's kind of like a misconception for first-time founders. If you compare yourself to the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks and so on, yes, they have, or Airbnb, for example, for that matter. In some cases, you can make the case that they've created a certain market for them, or a certain niche, completely changing how people use something, or essentially creating new demand in a place where demand was not. For example, like smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people misunderstand and think that it is quite achievable to create a market, whereas 99% of the cases, in my experience, is as a startup, unless you have billions and billions of dollars or pounds and a couple of years to spend at least, it is difficult to create a market. It's difficult to create a demand, but you create a supply for the existing demand. So it's very demand driven. Right. And this is something that I like, and that I also dislike about the startup ecosystem. But I don't know if you agree with that. What are your thoughts on this specific issue? Do you think, first of all, do you agree that it is as demand driven as I make it to be? And secondly, do you think, is it bad in a way that it is so demand driven because it leaves less room for innovation and so on?
I agree with you. I think for me, there's so much difficulty in really creating new markets, and I see a lot more potential in improving the way that existing demand and supply, for example, dynamics work. I think, in a way, there is a way to kind of impact more when you focus on the existing interactions of certain markets, and you look at their dynamics, and you start to see there that there are, I mean, if I take our examples with health tech and healthcare, we've seen this very real problem within the market of accessing basically mobile nursing capacity, and we've seen that there's a real issue in how supply and demand come to meet together. And we're not reinventing by any means the activities of that industry. We're taking what's there, but we're really enabling it to be more efficient through that tech overlay. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that is applicable across many different industries. And I like to look across to other verticals. If you look at, for example, fintech, I think they haven't created a market there. They've just really taken a pre-existing,
indeed, taken over the market.
Exactly. Yeah.
Classical banks to perhaps
absolutely, and completely redefine the way that people access these services. So I think it's very rare to be able to create markets from scratch. I think it can be done if you have very, very strong innovation. And I know healthcare, so I'm going to speak about healthcare, but if you look at the diagnostics side, I think there is a market that is trying to come to life now post-COVID around accessing diagnostics at home. And there's a lot of hope and a lot of hype as well around point of care diagnostics and the power that, we've discovered through these lateral flows, how much more in control people can be of their health. But realistically, it's going to take so many trial and errors before we get to a meaningful innovation in accessing care in your home and having a device that allows you to test for a gamut of different diseases or infections on one device. It will be fundamentally game-changing when it comes up, but that will be a new market, right? That will be a new way of accessing healthcare and a completely new set of behaviors from people. I think it's important just to keep these sort of breeding grounds for innovation alive, because they do move the needle. But at the same time, you cannot put all your hopes and bets into these baskets, and we're much more about fixing what's here and what's now and future proofing it.
So can you tell us how Ally Health, the idea, came to be? Was it a demand-driven idea, as we just mentioned? Did it come from a personal anecdote? And with that, perhaps a brief overview of what the business is and the way it solves the problem would be much appreciated.
Yes, absolutely, Roseanne. So it is a demand-driven problem. It's looking at the existing current way that people access healthcare. So coming out of the pandemic, I, like many other patients out there, have come to experience what it is like to access healthcare remotely and access a virtual GP on your phone. And I think that pandemic really got a lot of us used to that mode of accessing healthcare. Now, as a patient, what I experienced was a very disjointed pathway where I had the convenience of being able to speak to someone via my phone in literally 15 minutes. But where it fell apart, and as a patient, I grew very frustrated, was as soon as I was told, well, you're going to need a blood test, I don't really know how to help you here. We'll need to do a blood test. And once we have the results of that blood test, we'll be able to put a diagnosis. When basically, as soon as that came up, I was then told, well, actually, we as virtual GPs, we're not quite equipped to help you take that blood test. So why don't you go and see your NHS GP, and they will refer you to their local clinic where you're going to be able to have that sample taken.
It's almost like a break in the supply chain.
Exactly. It's an absolute break. And, it's almost you're disillusioned as a patient because you're kind of given this hope that your problem would be solved and you'd have the answers and you'd have control all throughout that pathway. And suddenly it all falls apart. So I ended up, calling my NHS surgery, waiting for a week for an appointment. Then you add another week before you can take that sample. And you'd have to go to a clinic that's out of your way during, working hours, and completely lose that convenience. So that was the problem that I experienced alongside many other people out there. And I started to dig into it. And the statistics kind of speak for themselves. What we find is that actually 70% of all medical decisions are rooted in lab examinations. And so you can imagine that's just blood tests, right? You can imagine how many more in-person care interventions are required beyond blood tests for any patient journey. So that was the problem we experienced, this disjointed patient pathway that almost prevented the full potential of digital health solutions from coming to life. And we started to initially think, gosh, there must be a way to access mobile nursing. Like, what does it look like today if I want to have a nurse come to my home to take a blood sample? And that was eye-opening.
Question.
This industry is stuck 20 years ago. I mentioned fintech earlier, but it felt like we were looking at, banking 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was all analog. You had to give a phone call to be able to book a nurse. Then someone would call you back. That nurse would call you back. You didn't know when. And you had no transparency in that process at all, and no control as a patient. So long story short, we got to that point where we found that there was almost a lack in the value, a big gaping hole in the value proposition of digital health. And if it was to really take hold, we needed to kind of fill that gap, which we call the last mile delivery of digital healthcare, getting to the patient in their communities rather than having them pile up back on the NHS wait lists. So that's where we started off, really. And then from there on, we went into problem solving mode, and we started to look at what were the solutions that we could bring to life there. And the short of it all is effectively, what if we could create the equivalent of Uber, but for mobile nursing? What would it be like if we could make community nursing available on demand to patients so that they keep control of their pathway? It integrates into their digital GP flows. And on the other side, on the flip side, for the nurses that would work with us, it would mean that they can be flexible in the hours that they work with us for, that we can optimize their tasks allocation as well. So that's also a big gain from their perspective. And the end result from a provider point of view, from a digital GP point of view, for example, is a closed loop. You do not lose your patient as soon as they need an in-person care intervention. You take care of them in their communities, and then you bring them back to you for that follow-up appointment, which in blunt terms, because people don't really like to talk about, money when it comes to healthcare, but in blunt terms, it is additional revenue opportunities for them as well. And of course, at the end of the day, it's better access for patients and better experience throughout. So that's what we're out there building with Ally.
Indeed. A big part of building is how you partner up. I love this saying, a startup is one deal away from either making it or failing sometimes. So looking back historically, perhaps over the last 6 months, what were the big wins for you? What were the big partnerships? What were the biggest milestones that you overcame so far?
Yeah, that's it's a great saying. I can really relate to it. So for us, we found a lot of strength in the partnerships we had established whilst building Testing for All. So what we were looking for in the early days of Ally was a way to just very simply test our hypothesis and say, okay, we're going to put a V1 of this product into the world, and we need a partner that's going to help us check whether our product improves the patient experience and really brings convenience through that sort of on-demand digital booking. And B, can we actually improve also how the nurse are interacting in their day-to-day, and how much as a sort of freelancer mobile nurse can you do in your day of work out there? So we turned to one of our best partners from the Testing for All days, and their lab based in up north, AccuLabs, and they agreed to kind of give us a shot at this. And they were looking at the time, as a lab, they needed to validate more tests as they're coming out of COVID, and they were really keen to expand their test portfolio. So they need to validate any new tests that come on board. And to do that requires a lot of sampling, venous sampling, to be done. So that was a simple way for us to say, okay, let's go. We have a common goal here. We have a solution that can help you do this. We think very seamlessly, very efficiently, and we can hopefully prove a few basic assumptions. So it's very much a testament to what you're saying, Ozan, because we could have been building kind of in the unknown for many, many months. without really confronting our product to the reality of the market. And actually that partnership helped us come to conclusions much faster on assumptions that we had been making, kind of disconnected from the real world. Really big one on there. And I think, that's probably in the past few months been really defining in the choices we've made.
Looking at the future, what do you think are the big milestones for you to achieve? What is critical for this business to be successful, in your opinion?
Absolutely. Scale is absolutely critical for us, both on the demand and on the supply side. We know a lot, we read a lot about network effects and the startups that have failed at landing any type of network effect.
Yeah.
So scale is going to be key. And I think
especially the platform type businesses.
Exactly. And we have to be quite, I would say, methodical about how we approach scale. And what I'm keen to do is the first milestone, and we're working towards it now, is establishing this micro network and the platform, balancing the platform dynamics on a micro scale, which for us is London. So we have the closest milestone for us is the launch of 2 key partnerships in January for us in London, where we're really going out there and we're testing whether there is enough supply and enough demand to keep both our nurses engaged, but also end users, i.e. our patients, satisfied with the access to the care that they can get. So that's the short term. And then looking beyond that, the longer term the challenge will be replicating what we found on that micro network across at a nationwide scale. So having access to also the nursing capacity and being able to keep our pipeline of really great nurses engaged and coming through to us.
It's about finding a critical mass, which is key at this. And also for other entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs, a key point you made that I just would like to underline is because you've achieved a certain network asset in some way of saying it via testing for all, you're able to leverage that in this new business. And I think that's kind of a key component of the growth of a company, growth of a successful startup, is that you need to have a different volume and class of assets. And one of them is the network asset. One of them is the relationships you have with people, time and money and energy and motivation and meaning. Of course, they're there as well. But we almost never start from scratch. There is always an asset that we rely on, which is okay and which is good in a way. So I would urge new founders to take that perspective if they're building a startup from scratch. So the right question to ask is, what are the assets? What are the competitive advantages that I already have? And that usually ties back to either which industry you know well, which people you know well, and which problems you know well.
I fully agree. It comes back down to what as a founder, what is your unfair advantage? And it could be, like you say, it could be an industry that you know really well, where you have a unique insight on things that haven't worked out quite well there, where you can solve a really very, very sort of acute pain point. And I've seen it a lot. And again, I go back to health tech, but you see, that's also why you see a lot of clinician becoming founders of health tech companies, because they've experienced it firsthand, and they also, in the process of defining the problem, they probably have also their first customer, because they'll be working with hospitals or they'll be working with trusts where they know that this problem is acute, and if they can come with a solution, they'll probably have their first customer and their first sort of proof of concept in that journey.
Indeed. And a big part of the founder's job is to be able to direct resources. So as we're approaching the end of our time, let's touch on that a bit. And when I say resources, basically I'm referring to the team you have, investment, if you have any investment or partners or any accelerators, co-working organizations that you've been part of. So essentially the people and the money side of the things. Tell us about that a bit.
Sure. Yeah. So our team has been through a lot together. I've been really fortunate to continue working on Ally with the team that is behind the success of Testing for All, which means that, we know each other so well, we can trust each other, and we know we've overcome a lot of challenges over the past 2.5 years or so. So that's really a massive advantage at this stage of our journey, where there is a high degree of uncertainty and you need to have a very sort of agile team. From Testing for All, we also keep our tech-first approach to solving problems. And naturally, the core of our team is engineering. They're really working under the guidance of James, my co-founder on Testing for All, now chairman of Ally, who's got that sort of product owner hat on and is really helping us prioritize the features we choose to focus on in the early days. Most recently, I've also, as we shifted from a B2C business with Testing for All into the world of B2B enterprise SaaS sales, I needed the expertise of someone who had done that successfully before. And I was lucky enough to cross paths with Sasha Tori, who was previously at Cured, where she was head of business development, and she had exactly that experience of scaling the business up and doing it in the health tech, digital health sector as well. So super relevant to us. And she initially joined Ally as a chief growth officer. And more recently, as we've gotten to know each other and started to trust each other a lot, we took the move for her to become my co-founder at Ally. You also asked me about funding. So to date, we have not had to seek external funding. We've self-funded, and we're in a lucky position where we're not rushing to the table for VC money. Rather, what we've done is we've engaged with them early doors to, get feedback and kind of test whether or not our vision had legs. And I think I would really recommend that to anyone starting out there. As soon as you feel like your idea is taking shape and you've obviously done your homework and everything, put yourself out there, go to VCs, go to angel investors and get their views, get their opinions, because they have a very critical lens on the industry that you're working in. And so whatever challenge is going to be thrown your way, you're going to learn from, and it might save you some headaches down the path as well. So we really value these early discussions, and the plus side for us is we got some VCs very excited about what we're doing. So we're confident that when we decide to go back out, when we have solid traction and product market fit to show for ourselves, we'll be able to have really meaningful conversations with VCs we know can really support us on that growth path.
Are you hiring any new team members?
So for now, we're really hiring on the tech side, on the tech and product side. It's mission impossible trying to find tech talent these days. So we're really, as many other startups out there, we're hunting for the best talent. And yeah, hopefully, if anyone from Twitter or any other tech startups out there is ever listening to this, give us Are
you looking for software developers, product managers?
We're looking for software developers, and we're looking for product owners as well.
Got it. So people, if they're listening to this, you can reach out to Kelly and introduce yourselves. But yeah, amazing chat. Thank you for sharing your insights, your experience. I think it was not only insightful, but also sincere. It can get a bit difficult building a startup in London. One of the issues, perhaps, for most people as they are starting out is a lot of the content out there in the internet is geared towards perhaps the US. And it's different to build a startup in the UK. It's different because especially the health, we've interviewed some other health tech companies before. The NHS structure also makes it different in its own regard. But I feel you have a lot to give. And I also think Ally Health is really sophisticated in the way that it's structured and in the way that it's trying to solve the problem. So not only I wish you good luck, I hope it becomes successful so we can depend on it as users, because it solves a real problem as well. Thank you for your time,
Thank
Kelly.
you, Ozan. Thank you for having me. It was a really pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, thanks for your time.